will share my screen then and we can get the meeting started.
Give folks a few more minutes.
Yes, I didn't mean you needed to start right this second. I'll have
Right,
the screen
right.
shared and ready to go.
And perhaps Dave from DAS.
Are we doing introductions?
Oh, no, sorry, just making sure you got elevated into the panelist meeting part.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, you bet. Thank you.
Hi, Stephanie, good to see you.
Kathy, I'm gonna try to link to my webcam. So I'm like, which camera am I supposed to look at? Very good to see you.
Good to see you. And we're getting close to a critical mass. I'll give it 2 more minutes and then we'll pick things off. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the June 11th.
Can't hear.
20... Can folks hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'll start again. Yes. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the June 11th, 2024 meeting of the Oregon Climate Action Commission to order. And welcome anyone who's new to us in this meeting from the public. And also welcome the guest speakers that'll be with us today and presenting later. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Amy, will you remind people how to use WebEx? And while you're at it, maybe let folks know how they can let us know that they want to provide public testimony later in the meeting.
Yes, so here are some instructions on how to use WebEx. It's pretty similar to other video conferencing programs. This slide is part of the slideshow that's posted on the meeting webpage, so I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but it's here for your reference if you would like to look at it. If anyone would like to provide public comment during the public comment period, please use the raise hand function. and we will call on commenters in the order that you raise your hand. Thank you.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. And we'll remind people right around our break again, so that if new folks come on that want to provide public comment, they know when it's coming. Well, first order of business, I wanted to welcome Jeff Crook to ODO and to the commission. As part of Jeff's duties, he will be providing the commission's primary support from the Oregon Department of Energy. And I want to turn it over to Alan to introduce Jeff, and Amy and Jeff to say a few words.
Yes, thanks, Chair McDonald. Jeff, you want to come on screen, and can you were having audio troubles. Can you talk? We hear you. Well, while Jeff's doing that, I'll do a little bit of an intro for him. So Jeff's our new senior climate action policy analyst. He comes on board with a lot of experience in the state, and will be the primary support person for the commission. And he comes from many years of working with ODOT as the former sustainability manager, and also in the climate policy office over there at ODOT. So finally meeting for him to join us. So real excited about Jeff coming on board and helping us out and eliminating one of the 3 jobs that Amy's been doing over the last several months, so she can take a little bit of a breather and get back to a normal kind of workload. So Jeff, are you able to talk? All right. Sounds like Jeff's having audio troubles. So when he figures that out.
I'm actually back now.
Ah, okay.
Excellent. Welcome, Jeff.
There you are. Cool.
Hey, everyone. Apologies for the delay.
Anything to add to your my little brief bio there, Jeff?
Oh, yeah, let me just say that, I really appreciate being here. It's great to be joining the commission on my second day. Just to say that I live and work remotely out of Salem, and I have a background in environmental policy and planning. I've been working in the climate mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency space for some time. Prior to my role here, I worked as a policy director with Ceres, which is a national nonprofit that leverages the private sector to drive climate action and decarbonize the economy. And I also have 20 years of service with the state of Oregon, including most recently 17 years with the Department of Transportation, and worked there as both the sustainability manager and as the policy lead for the ODOT Climate Office. So it's great to see ODOT on the agenda today. So feel free to reach out to me anytime for a conversation, and I really look forward to working with you all.
Jeff, welcome. We're really glad to have you on board.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
Yeah, it literally is his second day, so he's still a sponge.
I also wanted to thank those of you that provided public comments between our last meeting and this meeting. Those comments were shared with commissioners and posted to our website. And we will have time, as Amy mentioned earlier, for public comment later in the meeting. And for those of you that have requests in the written comments that were provided to the commission, we'll follow up after this meeting and with any answers to questions that we can help you with. So thanks again for sending those. Going on to our next order of business, it's been really challenging. I think we've talked about this at our last 2 meetings, to do the roll call as the commission has gotten much bigger. And it also takes a lot of our meeting time. So we did a little homework and determined that we actually don't need to do roll call during the meeting for it to all be official. We will be tracking attendance during the meetings and also taking role when we have to make votes to make sure we have quorum. If you are standing in for a commission member, you're welcome to participate in the discussions. You can't participate in any votes if you're standing in for a voting member. But if you do participate in the discussions today, I just appreciate it if you would identify which commissioner you're representing when you speak on a topic, just so that we kind of know where your thoughts are coming from. And with that, I think I can open the floor to any updates, and maybe for the first update, turn it to Amy to talk about the recruitment that we are doing for new commission members, and then we'll open the floor to others.
Thank you, Chair McDonald. So the commission is actively recruiting members to fill 4 voting member positions. And as required by statute, these seats must be filled by individuals with subject matter expertise or professional experience in environmental justice, manufacturing, or the fishing industry. We are also seeking a youth voting member aged 16 to 24 to serve a 2-year term. All of the other positions have 4-year terms. We issued a press release to promote the recruitment on May 16th, and we've posted a recruitment announcement on the Commission's June 11th meeting page that provides some more detail on the positions and explains how interested candidates can apply for one of these vacant seats. Oregon Climate Action Commission members are appointed by the governor. So applications must be submitted to the governor's office through the governor's webpage. There's an electronic application that you can fill out. And instructions for how to apply are available on the governor's boards and commissions page. Links to that page and to the electronic application are included in the recruitment announcement posted on the meeting page. So we encourage you to reference that announcement and share it with any of your contacts that you think would be good candidates for these seats. We are going to begin reviewing applications on a rolling basis. So we encourage interested candidates to submit applications as soon as possible. And we also want to clarify that if you or someone that you know previously submitted an application for an open seat, we are still considering those applications as well. So if you haven't heard back from us yet, it doesn't mean that we've rejected your application. We are just starting the process of reviewing all of the applications we've received to date. And I think that's it for my announcement. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. You can reach us at the Commission's new email address, which is ocac@energy.oregon.gov.
Thank you, Amy. I think the only other requirement is that you do have to be an Oregon resident to serve on the commission. So that's the only other requirement. Well, I'm excited about today's agenda. We're going to spend most of our time focusing in on transportation, given the important role or the transportation emissions in our overall footprint. It's an important topic for us to talk about, and important for us to catch up with the Oregon Department of Transportation and learn about all the good work they're doing to reduce emissions from the transportation sector. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from Director Strickler and Susan Heithman first on the agenda, and then we will be joined by Senator Chris Gorsuch and Representative Susan McLean, and they will talk about the development of the transportation package, which is expected to be discussed and passed in the 2025 session. And Chris will be, Director Strickler will be joining them for that as well. So really think it's a good opportunity. I think this is a foundational discussion about the transportation package, and imagine that we'll be coming back to this a number of times during the course of the next year to kind of learn more and consider ways that the commission might support the good work that needs to happen to reduce emissions in the transportation sector. Senator Gorsuch and Representative McLean, I believe, will be joining us a little bit later in the meeting. And then Amy will provide an overview of our expected work plan for 2024 and 2025, including the key deliverables that we have. We'll kind of focus in on that. And then we will take public comments starting at around 3:40, depending on how long the other agenda items go. So with that, as I just mentioned, Director Strickler and Susan Pythman from the Oregon Department of Transportation will be kicking us off today, and we're really looking forward to hearing your remarks. So take it away.
Wonderful. Can you hear me okay, Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Chair McDonald, members of the committee, for the record, this is Chris Strickler, Director of the Oregon Department of Transportation. I'm privileged to be joined by my colleague, Susan Pythman. She is our interim director of our climate office. And for those of you that don't know, ODOT stood up a climate office in 2020, shortly after I came into this role, really trying to focus on how we make decisions, how do we share that decision-making across the agency, and how do we bring the skill sets forward that would help us maybe make different decisions as we look at our projects and our programs and those kinds of things, to really benefit what we can do as an agency and influence outcomes to better our climate future. So all of those things are really kind of part and parcel to what we'll go through today. But before I start, I do have to say that congratulations to Jeff Crook, day 2. I think that's fantastic, although I will also say that since you're only in day 2, there's still plenty of time to come back to ODOT. So Madam Chair, I might just jump through a few slides and share that with my colleague, turn it over to her for a few as well, and then leave some time to maybe answer questions about where we sit. As we think about 2025 and the road to 2025, that might actually be a better place in that second portion that you just described, where we can really outline what we're doing as an agency and maybe what our version of the problem is. And then, of course, we'll be joined by our legislative leaders, and they'll be able to provide far more than I can on what the pathway is going into 25. So with this first slide, you see climate change and transportation and really where we sit. So I mentioned that we started in the 2020 timeframe by creating a climate office. The climate office really was stood up to address the fact that we all know that transportation emissions account for about 35% of Oregon's greenhouse gas emissions, and that the effects of those emissions, as well as climate change in general, kind of impact the infrastructure overall, whether that is damage to the infrastructure or its impacts to our human health, or a combination of all of the above as you think about the materials we use, as you think about the projects that we select, all of those things inherent in a transportation system. Climate change is already impacting Oregonians, and when you look to the natural disasters and the impacts associated just directly, that's probably when most people see and feel the most direct impact, but it's really occurring kind of all around us all the time, as you well know, and this group is well versed in the impacts there. We recognized in that 2020 timeframe that while we have to approach the problem from a transportation perspective in a way that allows us to make, I think, better informed decisions about the future of our transportation system, we also have to focus on how do we adapt to the fact that the existing system is struggling with keeping pace as well. And so much like our efforts around diversity in our agency, we've stood up the Climate Office as kind of a point of intellectual consistency, where they bring forward the great ideas that and manage the programs that we need to implement across the agency. But Susan and her team aren't solely responsible for all the actions taken. It's actually a shared breadth across our agency, whether you're talking about our projects or whether you're talking about some of our maintenance activities. Quick reminder for those of you that aren't aware, we're an agency of almost 5,000 folks across the state of Oregon. So you can find us in every corner. And as you look to that picture on the right, you can really see the things that we're attending to literally on a day-to-day basis, depending upon what Mother Nature throws at us. Next slide. A little over a decade ago, the challenges that I began describing and that this group is well versed in really kind of surfaced in a way that I said it's time for transportation to dive into potential remedies or solutions. Now, I say about a decade ago, although it's been happening much longer than that, but really the first kind of dedicated approach was in the statewide transportation strategy from ODOT. It's a roadmap for our greenhouse gas emission reduction, and we've been implementing programs and really making a significant amount of progress since that time. I would say, though, that in the 2020 timeframe, when we stood up the Climate Office, we certainly recognized as an agency that while the STS, or the Statewide Transportation Strategy, had been in existence for some time, we weren't making the progress that we wanted to make. So for all the good things that might have been in motion, or the good things that we might have been doing by way of policy or individual actions, impact is the place where we wanted to measure those outcomes. And we were seeing that we weren't making progress at a rate that we thought was acceptable. So in standing up that office, we really focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and really trying to stop the problem from getting worse, and better preparing our agency to respond to the incidents, be more resilient, and address the adaptation needs across the system. The work really falls primarily into 4 categories. Now, I will also say that as a state agent, nothing we ever do can be so succinctly defined as just individual categories. But Susan's group does a really great job of really outlining these 4 areas in this manner. Mitigation, really focusing on reducing our greenhouse gas contribution. And when I say our, I mean transportation, but also ODOT, and those are 2 separate things. Electrification, really focusing on, and I like the way the team has framed this, is doing everything we can to make every mile that is driven clean, and as clean as possible. And then adaptation, really focusing on and preparing for how we respond to challenges within the climate, whether that is future challenges that we're just now developing potential remedies for, or challenges that are literally hitting us every time we have a rain event, or every time we have a wildfire event, things like that. And then sustainability, cleaner energy, maybe looking at the materials that we use in our construction program, and then our fuel sources. As you can imagine, that our ability to respond after major events, whether it be Cascadia or any event, really relies on our fleet, our people, and our fuel sources in order to get there. So how can we provide cleaner options for the things that we do on a day-to-day basis? Next slide. As I mentioned before, the work of the climate spans all the agencies. So again, much like our diversity efforts to really expand awareness, decision-making, and understanding, Susan and her team do a fantastic job of really defining many of those criteria that I talked about before. But it's really everybody's responsibility to be thinking about what our future climate impact is and our current climate impact of the decisions that we make. We affirmed that climate focus, or at least climate as one of the focus areas in our recently adopted Oregon Transportation Plan. It sets the policy and transportation focus for the entire state, and really is kind of the outline that guides some of our policy level decision making going into the future. In that document, you see that climate is established as one of the 3 priority lenses by which we make transportation decisions. And you can see on the top side of the slide there, we filter those decisions through climate, equity, and safety, all being priorities for us. And just as an aside, I think we're all aware that the impact on our system as it relates to safety and the number of fatalities on our system is increasing, and that is nationwide. And so the transportation sector has to focus on ways to really move multiple priorities at the same time as we look to a safer and a cleaner transportation system. And then finally, really putting accountability metrics in the plan, including a carbon reduction metric and VMT reduction metric, consistent with the level of change needed, and that was identified in the statewide transportation strategy. Next slide. While the OTP itself, or the transportation plan, addresses what needs to be done and commits to a level of a timeline, we also have a strategic action plan. And our commission and the agency, we got together to develop a strategic action plan. And the word action is there on purpose. It's not something to kind of fit the title into. It really is designed to say, what is our near-term outlook, a 3 to 5 year outlook on actions that we can take that might produce or should produce really tangible results. Our strategic action plan puts those targets into action by addressing how each of the OTP implementation elements will be enacted year by year, along with specific measures of progress. So I won't read each of them on the screen other than to say that it really focuses on what can we do short term, whether it's transportation electrification, incorporating climate into our investment decisions for reducing carbon footprint, et cetera. And how does that then feed into the overall Oregon transportation plan? So you can see there's a nesting in our plans that's really designed to say these priority areas need to really be founded in all that we do for our focus going forward. So I'm now going to turn to the next slide, and this is where I'll hand it off to my colleague to go through the next few.
Thank you, Director Strickler. Chair McDonald, members of the Commission. For the record, again, my name is Susan Pythman. I'm the Interim Director of ODOT's Climate Office, and I'm here to walk you through a couple of examples of our policy into action. One of the implementing actions from our Strategic Action Plan is to apply a climate lens to ODOT investment decisions. The goal is to increase our investments that result in emission reductions and build infrastructure that is more resilient to climate change and extreme weather. As you can see on the slide, to understand if our investment decisions align with our stated goals, we evaluated our 2024 to 2027 statewide transportation improvement program, that's our investment portfolio, against our 2021 to 2024 STIP to understand if we had increased the number of projects that support positive climate-related outcomes and reduce the number of projects and the percentage of funding towards projects that challenge our GHG reduction efforts. An example of a project that advances our greenhouse gas goals is a protected pedestrian crossing to a transit station. Something that we would consider neutral would be a one-to-one replacement of our projects, and a project that would challenge would be expanding an intersection in an urban area that increases the distance for people walking and biking. We will continue this evaluation on our 27 to 30 STIP, and we're expanding our efforts to account for system resiliency projects and low carbon construction materials. Next slide. Regarding our transportation electrification efforts, we are going to direct deployment of public charging infrastructure. ODOT has committed $100 million of state and federal funds to building out our charging infrastructure for light-duty vehicles. We are focused where the public dollars can do the most good, and this is considering where the private sector is less interested on their own. We're specifically focusing on ODOT corridors, low income and rural areas, and the repair of existing charging stations. Our EV programs include the National Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Program, NEVI. This is $65 million that will build out the backbone system in Oregon on north, south, east, west, and diagonal corridors statewide on major routes like I-5 and US 97 and I-84. We have a program also to fix broken chargers. The goal is to improve EV charging to meet 97% operating time. This $12.5 million program will upgrade approximately 100 plus chargers across Oregon. One of my favorite programs is our community charging rebate program. This is $8 million for level 2 chargers statewide through rebates, and it supports rural and disadvantaged communities. 155 ports have already been installed with an additional 564 in progress. And this is just over 2 years, 2 rounds of our funding, approximately a year's time. Over 80% of these projects are in rural and disadvantaged communities, reaching over 60% of Oregon's counties and growing. I'd like to add that this is an exceptional complement to DEQ's Charge Ahead program and therefore clean vehicle rebates. Next slide. As Chris mentioned, climate is an agency issue, and the agency is addressing it in a myriad of ways, including reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from our construction and maintenance activities. ODOT conducted a greenhouse gas inventory to identify areas for emission reduction improvement. Our goals are to increase access to cleaner fuels, increase the use of lower emission materials, and develop an environmental declaration program for low carbon materials and fleet electrification. And a couple of examples of our successes include 60% of our diesel product dispensed at ODOT fuel sites is bio or renewable diesel. Additionally, 48% of our on-road diesel fleet is using anti-idling technology. This is 457 trucks, so it's not an insignificant amount. Additionally, we're working on the implementation of House Bill 4139. This will be implemented beginning of January 2026, and the bill requires ODOT to collect and maintain those environmental product declarations for materials used to construct and maintain the state transportation system, specifically asphalt, cement, concrete, and steel. To help support this effort, ODOT recently submitted a $41 million grant to Federal Highways Administration for research, specification development, and design guidance. So hopefully we'll get some accelerated movement on our construction and maintenance and operations work in the near future. Next slide, please. As the work is not just reducing our greenhouse gases, but preparing the system for those increased climate events and the intensity of weather that we're expecting to see. The system resilience is necessary to keep the roads open, travelers safe, and maintain the cost of climate and manage the cost of climate impacts through proactive approaches. Specifically, we have done an assessment of the historic and future climate risks and the economic and social equity impacts. This hazard assessment sets us up to better prepare and respond to those future events. We've also created an adaptation and resilience roadmap. This establishes the agency policies, strategies, and actions needed to improve our transportation system resilience. It also highlights what we're doing well and what we need to do more of in the future. Our research efforts are important to help us understand very specific and targeted needs, such as future coastal resilience and real-time post-wildfire impacts. And lastly, we're working on a priority route system to help inform where we can address the highest climate risk, economic disruption potential, and social vulnerability of these hazard impacts. So those are some of the specific things that we're doing that we wanted to highlight for this presentation. I'm going to hand it back to Director Strickler now. Next slide.
Thank you, Susan. A couple of other slides, and we only have a few more here to go through, but one of the things that is clear in transportation is that it really takes partnerships to accomplish just about any goal, and reducing emissions is one of those. Those partnerships can come in many forms. I've long said that ODOT has a responsibility and an obligation to continue to be climate forward as we think about what we want our future to be. Even within that, though, we need help from our partner agencies who bring experience and intellect that maybe we don't possess within the agency, or that complements what we're bringing to the table. In addition to that, we need private sector support and help. And you can think no further than just fleet turnover, for example. If the private sector can't turn the fleet over into something that is cleaner, then we're in this constant battle or inability to really make the gains that we are looking for as we start to set policy, even with all the incentives that are in place, because turnover just takes so much time. And when you think about the number of people that we serve, right? So a little over 4.5 million Oregonians that we're attempting to serve all the time, not to mention those that we're inviting into our great state to come share in what we experience and the reason why we all live here. So given the different regulatory and other responsibilities, frankly, that are spread across all of the different state agencies, we're lucky enough to have formed coalitions to kind of really tackle some of these problems together. You heard me before mentioned the statewide transportation strategy, and that really evolved into the next iteration or the next step towards partnership, which is the Every Mile Counts initiative. You've heard me a long time ago describe some of the efforts for that. Ms. Peets, who leads one of our divisions, has been describing that to you. And then, of course, you've probably heard from Susan as well. The Every Mile Counts initiative is a partnership between ODOT, DLCD, DEQ, and DOE, really focused on implementing that statewide transportation strategy and working across the agencies to reduce transportation emissions. Really focusing our key objectives on reducing vehicle miles traveled per capita, promoting cleaner fuels, electrifying the transportation system, some of those goals that you heard Susan describe just a few minutes ago. In addition to that, the Zero Emission Vehicle Interagency Working Group on Transportation Electrification. You can see the multiple agency coordination effort there, and it really keys into data that is housed within multiple agencies to say, what are the next steps that we can continue to advance, both on the utility and electric grid side, as well as zero emission vehicles. What can support, how can they support each other? Next slide. As you look to our climate actions and to all of our partners as well, having a real impact, you heard me mention at the very beginning that we were a little bit slower in the 2018-2019 timeframe, really responding to the statewide transportation strategy. Some of that was policy-related slowness. I'd say some of it was also just some of the efforts that we thought might make a dent and maybe didn't quite produce the results that we were hoping for. So in that time frame, we really doubled down, not just as an agency ourselves, but with our partner agencies. As you see on the slide here, our collective actions, and when I say collective, it's all the agencies on the previous slide, are expected to achieve a 60% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Now you see the note on the left where it says Oregon state agencies and local governments are working together to reduce GHG from transportation to 80% below. That is our target. And we're not quite there with the 60% reduction, but we're doing much better with our policies over the last 4 to 5 years to really make an impact or have an impact on our greenhouse gas emissions, with many of those being the vehicle turnover and fuel source. We're tracking progress through the Oregon Transportation Emissions Dashboard. So the picture on the left is a reflection of our web interface. And that includes high-level results and options to drill down even further to see some of the actions that we're working on and maybe where there's also opportunity for improvement. We see this as an opportunity to hold ourselves accountable. And as you think about the next portion of our agenda, where we start to talk about going into 25, it's a key focus for us to make sure that accountability rises to the top, not just in this space, but also, frankly, in what we deliver, how we deliver, and commitment to the promises that we make. Next slide. And then finally, Madam Chair, I wanted to draw some parallels to the Oregon Climate Action Roadmap. We are on the road to emissions reduction together. That's been clear for a long time. In fact, you don't have to look any further than many of the agendas of this group and frankly, many other groups that are talking about individual and discrete elements to contribute towards environmental and climate success as we think about our future. When we look to the specific elements, and I'm real keen on saying, how do we translate our policies into something that is actionable and tangible? Because if we're not careful, we might get caught up in a great conversation that doesn't have those tangible outcomes that everybody is expecting out of us. And we've all got a heavy lift to carry here and a responsibility to take those actions. But just on the screen, you can see a few of the areas where you really see those synergies come into play. The statewide transportation strategy and the climate action roadmap really focusing on transitioning of transit buses by 2035 or off-road vehicle sales for construction to ZEV by 2035 and 100% by 2050. Setting targets to then allow market conditions to catch up, but also to implement targeted actions. You heard Susan mention that our commission invested $100 million in electrification on the system. It's important to note that that's leadership at our commission level. So the NEVI program that Susan had mentioned really dedicated somewhere around 55 million. I think a little under, I'll get the number wrong here, but it was right in that target range from our federal partners. And our commission said, we need to invest more. And so really doubled down and increased our level of investment to closer to 100 million so that we could reach those hard to reach corridors, provide that reliability that I think is causing some of the fleet and EV issues that we hear frequently. And then also to really better serve the underserved areas, those areas that frankly don't have the ability to access a zero emission vehicle because they simply have no way to fuel it or no reliable way to fuel it. All of those efforts are complementary. And by the way, these are just two documents that we're comparing here. We certainly have dozens more across the state enterprise that we could draw these comparisons to really show how many agencies are kind of putting their shoulder into this work and recognizing that we have to attack the problems that we not only control, but can influence. So not just where our authorities sit, but the things that we can influence beyond. Because as I said before, it will take more than just the state agencies. It will take many of us, both inside and outside of state government, to really achieve the goals that we're searching for. So Madam Chair, that's our last slide. I want to thank you for the opportunity to walk through those, and obviously at your discretion, Susan and I are happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. I have a few questions myself, and then I can open up to the floor for more questions. I also thought, given your very good point, that much of what needs to happen in partnership across agencies. So if other agencies who are involved in this work and thinking about transportation and ways to reduce emissions want to add thoughts to what we just heard in the great presentation from Director Strickler and Susan, we'll open the floor for that as well. I had a couple of questions. On your fourth slide, in a couple of slides, you had a focus on metrics, and you called out vehicle miles traveled metrics in particular as an important thing that you're paying attention to for reducing transportation emissions. And with the fleet transitioning to electric vehicles and other alternative low carbon fuels, are vehicle miles traveled the best focus of a measurement? I certainly appreciate that it makes my life more enjoyable to not have to drive as much, but just wanted to hear your reflections on why that is one of the two metrics that you really focused on with us.
Yeah, Chair McDonald, thank you for that question, and I think that's a great one. And Susan, I'll take a first cut, and then if you have thoughts to add as well. There's really a couple of reasons, and so I think you actually nailed the one, and I'll expand on that a little bit, which is as we started to look at the transportation sector, we were really focused on the previous fleet, and a lot of the previous fleet is still out there. And so to the extent that we can reduce VMT for those users, that's great. And I think at times, as we're setting targets, we have to be open to the adaptation of different targets to really reflect or respond to market conditions. So really specifically, do I think the VMT as its own is probably the best target for GHG reduction? Probably not, as you look into the future. Now, I will certainly say I've got some bias to say if we can get fewer people on the system, if we can have more walkable communities, right, we contribute to positive health outcomes, and we also have less need to do some of the road work that we'll talk about for the 25 package. So I am continuing to invest in that as a strategy. But as you think about fleet turnover, you're spot on that we need to continue to look at other targets as well. And I would almost submit that while we know the science is dictating certain results in many different areas, we have to be responsive to how market conditions, fleet turnover, and other elements might trigger a change for what we want to measure going into the future to make sure that we're achieving those outcomes. Otherwise, we'll get too fixated on one of the metrics in and of themselves, and we won't accomplish the goal that we're shooting for. So I still find it to be an important measure, but certainly as we look to a future EV, a more EV future, it'll become harder to say that that's the sole target, or at least the most prominent target. The other thing I would say, just as an aside, is we're really lucky in Oregon that we look at the Western states, we're the smallest in population, but the Western states are kind of carrying the country in EV registrations. Right now, we are third in the country at the number of EV registrations, obviously behind California. I won't even speak to the size difference there. And then, of course, Washington is doing pretty well as well. So we're really carrying a significant load in the number of EV registrations, but still a long ways to go. Susan, anything you want to add?
Sorry, just unmuting. No, Chris, I think you answered it fantastically. I just add 2 points specifically. Recognizing that these are a pull from our Oregon Transportation Plan. So those are metrics for the agency for transportation. And we do have EV integrated into the transition to cleaner vehicles. So the VMT reduction is absolutely the complement to EV work. The other piece I'd say is that we recognize that like our future is not of one of unlimited energy, and our work with Department of Land Use and Conservation, along with the climate friendly and equitable communities and land use work, is important for that VMT reduction. And so as we're looking at conserving energy in the future, VMT reduction is the transportation analog of that energy conservation. So just wanted to say that it's a very future looking metric.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate both of your answers. I have a couple of other questions. One more on the timeline for the climate actions that you have, and maybe this is a conversation for our next agenda item too. I guess one of my questions was, is there anything that could be done as part of the 25 package to kind of do more or move faster on that? So maybe we can put a pin in that and talk about it in our next agenda item. And then the last question I wanted to go back to was the slide that, well, 2 more questions. One, when you estimate the 60% reduction in emissions from transportation, is that considering state actions, or does it also make assumptions about adoption of EVs and fleet turnover to EVs? Is it including kind of what we're projecting from that as well as the state's actions?
Yeah, great question. And I'll let Susan fill in all of the details, but I will say at the macro scale, it assumes many of the actions from other entities across the state, as well as future projections on what we think as far as fleet turnover. But Susan, can you round out the details?
Yes, so that does include our on-road EV mix at 60% in 2050. And it is, I'm sorry, your question was, does it include just the state actions and the integration of EVs? The answer is both.
Okay, so market forces in addition to kind of state actions. Thank you. And then if I'm not sure I'm reading this slide correctly. I was trying to do the math with percentages versus the emissions, but it looks, in thinking about, and I appreciated you showing us the commission's roadmap and the linkages there. The roadmap has us hopefully hitting a target of 32 million metric tons in 2030 if we were able to kind of accelerate action. And if I'm reading this correctly, in 2030, there would be something around a 5 or 8% reduction in transportation emissions. And so then transportation would go from where it is now at 35% of our emissions footprint up to it would need to go up to like 62% if we were going to be able to hit those targets. Am I reading that correctly? And, or did I do the math wrong? Or I don't want to put you on the spot, but just interested in kind of your thoughts about the kind of the role of transportation, of reductions in transportations relative to some of the other sectors.
So I'm always hesitant to do math on the spot, even though I am an engineer.
I was too.
Yeah, but I would say we'll see. We can certainly get back to you unless Susan has an answer right
Great.
now.
I was just gonna say my weak spot is trying to do math or type in front of other people, and so if you'd be willing, so gracious to let us get back to you on that question, if you wouldn't mind
Absolutely.
putting it in writing, we'd love to get back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can talk about it at a future meeting as well. And I guess all to say, you know, I am personally hoping that we'll be as aggressive as we can be in the 25 session relative to reducing transportation emissions. So that's my kind of that's what got me thinking along the lines of trying to do math. So, but we can follow up. I also can't type in front of, you know, in front of people. So I hear you on that. I'll just open the floor. Are there other either thoughts that directors of other agencies who are involved in this work want to share, or commission members, questions that you have about the presentation or comments? And just as a reminder, it is hard to see when hands are raised. So if for some reason Amy and I don't call on you, feel free to, oh, there we go, Tom Reitman.
So could the Climate Action Commission help with the funding mix? You know, obviously, all of these things that you talk about reduce the amount of revenue from how you're traditionally funded through fuel taxes. So that's perhaps an issue for another. We could spend a whole meeting, I guess, on that topic, but
I think that'll probably be a big part of our next agenda item.
okay.
But thank you. Are there other commissioners or directors that want to add some thoughts?
Hey, put my hand up. It sounds like maybe you can't see it. This is Mark Brady. I'm with Business Oregon. I'm here for representing our director, Siborn Chang. Question, well, kind of two-part question. One, my understanding, maybe I'm wrong on this, is that at least some of ODOT's money comes from the federal government, and that comes with strings attached to it. So thinking about that slide you had with projects that help your climate goals or hurt your climate goals or are neutral, wondering if you could talk a little bit about how much the Fed's requirements tie your hands to push projects maybe into more of the helping category that you would prefer to do.
Yeah, it's a great question. So as we think about ODOT's budget, and we'll get into a little bit of this in the next session, but it's worth probably opening a little bit of that dialogue here. We're about a $6 billion biennium agency. But as you think about that scale, and that is a lot of money, that is either dedicated or programmed in individual program elements. So what I mean by that is our federal partners that give us some of the federal money, which is a significant part of ODOT's budget is federal. They have certain criteria that we have to hit as far as performance on the system. So some of that, for example, is payments on the interstate have to be in a certain condition or we start to lose funding capacity. It really gets to specifics such as something that narrow. But also, in addition to that, they have programs, right? And the programs can be Safe Routes to School. The programs are dedicated areas where we've got state-infused programs like our Great Streets program. And those kinds of things can help influence investment. As you think about the overall state of the system itself, at scale, that $6 billion budget, by the time you take out what we share locally, because again, everything you hear us describe as far as a need on the state system, our locals are experiencing too. So cities and counties are really struggling to keep pace with their needs, and they are in some funding difficulties right now in ways that we are as well. All of that then gets, in many ways, taken off the top. So our bonded capacity gets taken off the top. Funds that go to local jurisdictions are taken off the top. And by the time you get to ODOT's share, we then have another round of bonding that's taken off, and you start to narrow it down pretty quickly. So of that $6 billion, we have about $360 million annually to really take care of the system. That's the maintenance and operation. So you can start to see the scale really drops pretty rapidly. More specifically to your question about what helps or hurts as far as our climate future, I would say that our federal partners are heavily invested in a better climate future as well. And so many of their programs, whether that is on the micro scale for Safe Routes to School, or the funding that comes in for EV infrastructure, are coming from our federal partners. The majority of their money comes by way of either grants in programs that we apply and compete for with other states across the country, or programs which are really focused primarily on taking care of the system. And when I say taking care of the system, it's the maintenance and preservation efforts. So we have a bridge preservation program, pavement preservation program, et cetera. Those preservation activities are the ones that are directed by federal highways. And then, of course, we can apply for grants. I will note that the NEVI money that Susan mentioned earlier, and that our commission plussed up, that is a new program that was put in place by our federal partners. And our share of that was in the $55 million range. And then we used some of the discretionary dollars that came in from our federal partners to plus that up to $100 million through our commission. So the shorter answer, instead of my long-winded rambling, would be there's a little bit of both, but their goals are the same as ours at improving our climate future. And so most of their programs really do fall into kind of a future climate benefit or preserving the system, or both.
Great. Thank you. Colin, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair McDonald. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. For the record, Colin McConaughey filling in for Director Felden at Oregon DEQ. Wanted to come off mute for a couple reasons. First, just to appreciate the partnership over the recent years with ODOT. The DEQ has enjoyed and benefited from, I think, hopefully mutually, in our shared ambitions around addressing transportation pollution, and specifically climate pollution from that sector. And secondly, as the agency, I think, most squarely focused, if we were to go back to the previous slide that was up there for a number of minutes, listing on the right-hand side the many different strategies to address transportation pollution. The bottom two, fuels and vehicles, I think DEQ is the state agency most focused on squarely on those two levers. And specifically on the fuels front, want to flag just to raise awareness that there are on the fuels side of things, climate strategies that don't necessarily erode the existing traditional transportation tax base. And I'm thinking specifically of fuels like renewable diesel that Director Strickler referenced, I believe, earlier. That's a key climate strategy that our agency has a lot of visibility into increasingly, and really the onset in across the Western region for renewable diesel capacity and production and supply here in Oregon has increased dramatically in recent years. And in our clean fuels program, we're now over 2 years ahead of schedule, largely as a consequence of the logarithmic growth of that clean fuel, that climate strategy. So just want to raise awareness for the commission that it's, and I think most folks know, it's not just about electricity. That's a key strategy as well, but there are other climate strategies here for clean fuels. So thank you. Just wanted to put that on the record, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Are there questions or comments? Dave Wortman.
Thank you, Chair McDonald. So this is Dave Wortman. I am representing DAS today in for Shannon Ryan, our Enterprise Asset Management Administrator. And just really more of a comment. I think as Susan knows, very fresh that the Sustainability Board has been sort of refreshed and restocked with a bunch of new members. And they are very willing and eager to help on transportation issues. Their focus mainly is on operations, but certainly they have a keen interest in helping with ODOT's climate-related operational issues, or the EPD program, things like that. And they can also take on other special projects. So I know there's been talk in the past about coordination between the board and the Climate Action Commission. So, and I know Jeff from his previous work with the Sustainability Board. So all that's to say is I would encourage collaboration and kind of putting talents together to help on this issue, because the board would definitely be interested in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Commissioner Apter.
Thank you. Really appreciate the presentation, and very excited to get to the next portion as well. I wanted to ask a question related to what Susan mentioned, and I think was a thread throughout, as far as the overall agency practice of applying a climate lens to budget and investment decisions. And was curious if you could share a little bit more in terms of how some of the metrics that you discussed in a different part of the presentation are applied through that decision-making process. I know that sometimes, I know even tomorrow, like the Oregon Transportation Commission, I believe, is considering, for example, options to close what I understand is a structural funding gap for projects managed by the Urban Mobility Strategy. And just using that as an example, curious how, in thinking about those funding decisions and investment decisions, ODOT is considering implications for emissions and for equity outcomes based on, in this case, a redirection of funds.
I'm happy to take the part on the evaluation of the STIP. Chris, did you want to address anything around the specific budget issues at the moment?
Yeah, I'll let you go ahead and take the programmatic elements and the first.
Okay, great. Amy, if you could head on the last slide, you're kind of flip-flopping between two slides. This one is the statewide transportation improvement program. So Nora, I'll hit that first part of your questions, just that how are you doing this isn't a demonstration of how we're doing the assessment of our investment decisions. So through the Oregon Transportation Plan, we articulate that we have a climate equity and safety lens over which to apply to investment decisions. And so this slide is a demonstration of that assessment. And so the Climate Office and the rest, and anyone in our program development, our construction program development, are working to understand how the projects on our list either support or challenge climate goals. And then there's the communication of that analysis for transparency and accountability. So wanted to say that we're in a space of how do we operationalize that policy of climate safety and equity and do the evaluation of it. And it's multiple layers when you have such a large portfolio. And so this is part of the agency's commitment to just the full integration of those lenses, and then that transparency piece of it. So I hope that helps just communicate how we're doing that assessment a little bit. But I know that you mentioned some of the funding challenges that and some of the pieces that are going in front of the OTC tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I would say that a couple of things come into play as we look to kind of the Commission's ongoing management of what we have for our statewide transportation improvement, our transportation projects going into the future. And we'll talk a little bit about this in the build up for 25, and I'll lean a little bit on our legislative partners for some of their direction that came out of House Bill 2017 and some of the priorities for the state as we think about all of the competing priorities and the things that we're working on in the transportation space. A couple of things to note. Obviously, we've got kind of projects that we're still in the process of constructing that were either dedicated in House Bill 2017 or were programmatic decisions that were made in previous STIP cycles that we're working to finish up. And as we think about really trying to balance those priorities and those projects, certain projects come to the surface and they end up costing more. And they cost more because of a lot of different factors. Some of that is inadequate definition of the project at the early stages. Some of it's also when you look to just the overall impacts of inflation and those kinds of things. And you'll probably note that many of our projects, they really kind of target individual goals. So this will come as no surprise to anybody in this group that the economy moves on the transportation system, the access to available transportation so people can get to and from their jobs really is connected to our transportation system. Those communities that transportation has left out for years and decades for that matter, have really kind of raised up and said, we've got to find a more equitable way for our transportation system to serve our needs. A couple of the projects on the urban mobility strategy or within the urban mobility strategy are products of those commitments made in House Bill 2017, a doubling down on our commitments to communities that, frankly, we have historically marginalized or forgotten in the transportation sector, and reaffirming those commitments to them to say we have unfinished business, for lack of a better term. And a couple of the projects on the list for discussion with the commission tomorrow really revolve around that. I'm proud of the fact that the Rose Quarter project, for example, really has a main element associated with it that reconnects a community that was not only bifurcated, but displaced and neglected and dismissed 60 years ago. And we have an opportunity here to provide a reconnection in that area that isn't going to solve those past decisions, but it will certainly demonstrate that we care about access for individuals in a way that we haven't always done in the transportation sector. That's really part and parcel to that foundational discussion, not to mention the fact that we've got the Abernathy Bridge, for example, on 205, that is a seismically vulnerable bridge. So we have to make sure that Oregon can respond to those natural disasters as well as we look at the overall system. So we're really trying to fold in this future decision-making on our projects. At the same time, following through on those commitments that we've made, not just to the legislature and ourselves, but to the communities that we've historically neglected and left behind. That's really the foundation of trying to shore up those financial plan discussions for those projects that we made commitments to earlier. And Madam Chair, I see my other chair's hand up right now. Just.
Can you hear me? Yes. So I just wanted to say there, Director, that I think you should mention that we got an award for the Rose Quarter caps that we're putting together just recently, because it's a perfect example of really dealing with a lot of things, including equity and environment. If we have complete communities and we have economic development there and we have jobs close to homes, they have a better chance for a multimodal walking, rolling, and a kind of system that's going to allow us to have more options for folks when they're deciding how to travel. So I just felt like that was important. I want to talk about the I-5 bridge, but I'll get a chance, I'll bet. So.
Chair McLean, thank you so much for those additions, because those are spot on as usual. And I will say that I am happy to report that ODOT's largest award ever received was $450 million in the Reconnecting Communities program from our federal partners dedicated to Rose Quarter. So really trying to walk our talk, I guess, is the way that I would describe that. And we've got federal partners supporting us along the way.
Sorry, I was muted. I was welcoming Representative McLean. Thank you for joining us, and I'm glad to have him join the conversation. Do you know if Senator Gorsuch is going to be able to join us?
I'm not sure.
He is a panelist right now. He is online.
Oh, great, excellent. I tried to do the quick scan of the squares at the top of my screen, but apologies, I didn't see you, Senator Gorsuch. So welcome to you as well. And I think we can probably roll into the next conversation, maybe come back to some of these topics, and love to hear from both of you on the process that you're going through to get information from Oregonians about what's important as you think about the transportation package, kind of the process that you anticipate following, and then we'll go back into some of the more issues, priorities, and some of the solutions to some of the issues. So turn the floor over to both of you, and welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I know how busy you are.
My co-chair, would you like to go first, or would? So I can go first then and allow us to get started. First of all, I want to thank the director and Susan for a good basic summary of some of the issues that we're dealing with and some of the ways our agency is trying to deal with making sure that we do have a filter of equity and environment right off the bat on everything that we do. And as Chris Gorsuch and I co-chair both the I-5 Bridge Committee and the Joint Transportation Committee, it's very much part of all the work we do in every single committee meeting that we're in, because we're looking always on how to meet those filters. We don't put them as a goal, we put them as a filter that we actually take our work and we really discuss it through. How are we going to help with our equity and the communities that we need to support because they haven't had as much opportunity or they haven't had the ability to be able to use some of the multimodal services that we have in other areas. Also, it's important for you to know, as I heard the chair say today, that we do have to talk a little bit, not just about process, but also about resources. We have to look at the fact that, as our director pointed out, that we have tools that have been used for financing transportation in the state of Oregon that are either broken or going down quickly. And we don't have the resources to be able to do back to basics, multimodal services, and be able to make sure that our system is in good shape and is safe. And safety is also one of those filters that we put everything through. As far as the process, my co-chair and I started off with our Portland stop on Tuesday. We had over 55 people in the room for our roundtable, which has a wide variety of voices from the community. They are area topic specialists from environment to workers. And we also had users like AAA and freight. And we also had elected officials from both our cities, our counties, our metro region, as well as legislators. And we had a 2-hour roundtable after we did our 2-hour tour in the morning. And then in the evening, we had over 200 people show up for an evening public hearing. We were only able to get through 50%, but the rest of them had 48 hours to get their testimony into us in written form. That's just the beginning. We're going to Tillamook this next week, and then we head up around the state, Coos Bay and Medford, Ontario, Bend. We go to the Dalles and many other areas of the state to add up to about 12 trips. We're trying really hard to get updates regionally to find out what some of the challenges are in the different parts of the state as far as having good multimodal consistent service for their citizens. And we're also trying to make sure that we are dealing with the idea that we do have limited dollars. We do have an opportunity here in 24 and 25 to talk about improving and making sure our funding is diversified, stable, and sufficient, and that it takes care of the many things that we want to do, which of course includes trying to get to some of that reduction, that 60% reduction, and really help us have cleaner fuel as we go forward. One of the other elements that I've heard more in the last few years has been that we also have to have a backup system. I think it was DAS, or maybe it was the Energy a department that basically said it's not just about electrification and the grid. We have to continue to work on rebates and electrification, making sure we've got a grid that we can depend on no matter what conditions we face in the future. But we also have to look at wind, and we have to figure out how to use solar as it relates to the grid, hydrogen as it relates to the grid, and making sure that we have the different types of what we would call intermittent types of fuel as we are getting to the goals of, 100% green fuel in the future. The other part is we've talked a lot, when we talk about environment, we talk a lot about bikes and ped and walking and those types of things, including transit, which in 2017, we put in the first transit dollars that the state had ever done. I know we will have transit facilities and transit, different groups from Medford and Eugene and Portland and all over the state who will want to increase our investment in those areas in 24 and 25. But again, we have to look at what is doable and what are the resources that we're going to have at hand to be able to meet some of those goals. Whether it's resiliency, whether it's safety, whether it's multimodal systems that are across the state and sufficient and effective, or whether we're trying to continue to meet our green goals and our environmental standards, or continue to improve on our environmental standards, we have to talk about how we're going to get there and make sure it happens in 25. The only failure that we could possibly have that would be catastrophic is not having a finished successful program in 25, because we have ODOT and our agency that need the funds to run their business and do all of the responsibilities that they have in front of them that we've given them as a legislature and you as a commission. And we also have responsibilities to a wide variety of other services, including education. Please remember that $6 billion sounds like a lot of money right now for education. We gave 10.2 to K-12 last year billion, and we gave 15.3 to overall education systems from early learning to higher education. So we also have to balance our budget, and we have to make sure that we can meet all services that are required: infrastructure, education, health, and other areas. So we have to do this as a team, and it's got to be Team Oregon. And as the director pointed out, the cities and the counties are facing the same thing. And on this tour, we're going to have an opportunity to go out and talk to those partners and figure out how we're going to get this done together.
Thank you, Representative McLean.
Can you hear me now? I'm having computer problems.
Maybe, it sounds like you're maybe connected in two places. At least that's what happens when I hear that echo.
Let me see if I can figure that out.
I'll go ahead and ask a few of the questions of Representative McLean. In terms of the kinds of information that's most helpful from the public, are there any tips that you could share in terms of how specific, how the public can be most helpful in the process of coming up with a good transportation package?
In our roundtable, we tried to sort of give some of those leading questions to get some things that, and we started out with a question of what's top of mind. What are you thinking about when you think about a successful package in 25? We followed that up with what is some regional items that you really want the state legislature to know? What are some things that you're concerned about? Do you find some of the programs that we started in 2017 to be important, like Safe Routes to School? How would you improve that program? But I think that would be my answer right off the bat.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think I fixed it. Can you hear me?
You
correctly?
did.
Yeah. All right, very good. Sorry about
Welcome,
that.
Senator.
Thank you for having us. So what was the question you wanted to ask?
Well, I just, if you have any opening remarks, or we can just kind of walk through some of the other questions. I guess my next question that I had posed was just, will you be writing up some kind of a report that summarizes all the information you get from these incredible listening sessions that you're doing across the state?
Yeah, I think that's going to be an important part of what we discover. We also now plan to give a recap of what happens during the roundtables, so that people who aren't in those meetings will be able to have an idea of what was said. The overall information that we're trying to gather, though, is we hope solution-based. And so that's what we're, I think we got that in the first meeting, and I hope that continues. But the idea is not just for people to vent how they feel. I understand that that's an important part of dialogue, but we really do want people to give us ideas. And I think the most important part of this is that we have, don't do that. My cat just attacked me. I think she's very upset about transportation. Anyway, we have a good solid start when ODOT gives us a background on things. And so it's also hopefully educating people on, the seriousness of this. However, we have been working a lot to work with not just transportation people, but with business people, with the trucks, with environmentalists, because it needs to be a holistic effort for sure. And that's what we hope to finally have at the end of this when we start thinking about legislation for next year.
Great. And Senator, you mentioned that you're going to be doing recaps and anticipate that there will be some kind of a summary later. Are those hosted on the Joint Transportation Committee's site on OLIS, or are those?
I think they will be. If Patrick is around, he would know for sure, or maybe Chris Strickler, but I believe that's how it will work.
Director Strickler, is anything to add there?
I'll have to get back to you. I think the point of contact would be Patrick, as you mentioned, and I'll get back to you on where to find those summaries.
Great. Thank you very much.
I could add one item to that. What we're trying to do, as my co-chair pointed out, was we're trying to summarize before the public testimony in the evening, what happened in the roundtable. But number two, we're also trying to make sure that we don't just use the tour. My co-chair, Senator Gorsuch, and I are going out to meet with Clackamas County and the folks that are out there. We met with the Metro mayors and the Washington County mayors a couple of weeks ago. We're talking to groups like Street Trust that brought in a large 3-day program that dealt with transportation and safety and some of their hopes for a multimodal system. So we're not just depending on the tour. And then to your second point, which was about breakout groups or about subgroups, when we get further toward 25, we're going to be having subgroups from the Joint Transportation Committee that are going to be working actively on the ideas for funding and on the ideas for the program itself and for the planning and the projects that we want to invest in 25. So there'll be opportunity for that also to be on OLIS and for the public to keep track of us and to see what the conversations are that we're having as we get into the session in the early part of 25.
You have a busy year ahead of you.
Yeah, indeed.
Any commissioners want to ask any questions about the process? And if not, we'll kind of move more to the kind of the issues and priorities and get back to some of the funding discussions. Any other process questions?
This is Commissioner After, not a question. I just wanted to really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you all have put into organizing this process and making sure that there is robust opportunity for public input. And I hope the commission can look for ways to uplift these opportunities and public forums, and really eager to get a readout at a later date once they've concluded in terms of major themes and opportunities and kind of next steps in terms of taking that input and translating it into policy and funding solutions for next session. So thank you for all the work.
Great. I'll do a quick scan to see if there are any other questions or comments. Okay, well then Amy, if you would advance the slide to kind of the issues and opportunities. And I I appreciated the focus on let's try and come up with solutions. But if you could, Representative McLean, you mentioned the funding challenges that the state of Oregon has in terms of the restrictions on the gas tax, and it was great to see a more diversified funding stream in the 2017 package. But just love to hear more conversation from all three of you about funding and what some of the ideas might be for continuing that diversification that hopefully would allow us to invest more in things that reduce our carbon footprint from transportation.
So I'm happy to start with talking for a minute about the payroll tax. The payroll tax was a new source of revenue in 2017, and we have transit agencies all over the state of Oregon that want to do a better job making a more holistic and a deeper dive into services around the state, and they're all different. Whether, you know, it's a small transit agency or a large one, they know that they've got places where they can work on safety, they can work on ridership, and they can work on connectivity that they don't have today. So that's one area where I know we have service providers out there that are going to be coming to us, you know, suggesting investment and priority in that area, and something we certainly will be listening to, and something we want, at least, you know, from our basic conversations, we want it to be a very pertinent part, and also a very protected part of what we continue to do with our investment with our transportation dollars. Another example is we have people in other states who have tried some different things, because we need short, mid, and long-term funding tools and abilities and revenue streams. And especially if we want to get to the environmental work that you have as your number one priority. And so we have to look at things that can be short-term, that we can turn around and implement right away. Vehicle miles traveled, tolling, some of these other things are not short-term turnarounds. And so it's going to be important for us to look at things like possibly delivery fees, or an inflation index factor to the fuel tax, or an opportunity to make sure that we are looking at what kind of fees we have, and where the fees would help us get people who aren't paying something to help us with our system in the present day, that they might be able to help us, whether that's EVs, whether it's a change of registration fee, or whether it's another type of revenue stream that we will be discussing as we go through some of these options. Midterm, possibly vehicle miles traveled. But we've got to be able to look at everything that's on the table, and you can probably get us to name 6, 7, 8 different types of revenue streams that are still actively on the table at this time.
Thank you, Representative McLean. Anything to add, Senator Gorsuch or
Oh, absolutely.
Director?
The primary thing that we have to do, and that's what we hope to get out of all of these meetings, is to sort all of that out. It's a daunting task. And we know, unfortunately, that the gas tax has been fading. It's not indexed to inflation, and so that's been part of our problem. But it also will be something that has to be, I think, a gradual shift. Now, I have been in discussions with some of our legal folks at the Capitol about the potential to bring in more revenue for rail. And I would like to, I have a Metro study going on right now about enhancing rail passenger service in the Portland metropolitan area. And we have found that there are some possibilities that we can use, like some sort of a tire fee that we could use for rail. And also, if we had some creation of a rail authority, we'd be able to fund that. It's still in its infancy, but I believe that, especially with climate issues, one of the important things is to provide quicker, more certain service. And we might be able to do that with this. You know that a lot of times we get hung up on the Constitution's requirement that gas tax be used for highways and freeways. So this might be a way to get around all of that. We should also have a preliminary report back from Metro in December about this study.
Excellent, thank you. Director, anything you want to add?
Yeah,
around
Madam Chair,
funding?
if I could, I'd like to just take a moment to talk about not just the alternative modes and the alternative sources of funds, but how kind of a universal ask might come together. And I use ask in kind of a strange terminology there because in many ways, we've been working with the Joint Committee for several years to really talk about our operational problems. And when we say operational, it means different things to different people. So I want to put just a little bit of definition to it here. When we say operations, it is our maintenance folks responding to a landslide. It is our maintenance folks responding to potholes. It is the folks that support them in our HR and IT functions. It is DMV counter staff. It is the foundational elements that you can't charge to a project in an agency such as ours. So you're all well versed in the fact that we have projects all over the state, but many of those are kind of project charge elements. And so what's not as well understood is ODOT is funded really in kind of a tale of two budgets. One side is a project and program based budget line. And there's a lot of federal money in that, and there's state money in that, and there's programs that are statutorily dedicated. The other side, though, is that all the things that it takes to keep the agency and the system operating outside of the projects and the programs. That is really where we're starved in near term, and then absolutely even more so as early as kind of July of next year. The legislative leadership, not just in the Joint Committee, but even broader, has said that we don't want the service cuts associated with that, right? So the last legislative discussion, we were talking about reducing snow plows and fog line striping, which seems like kind of small elements, but they're really important to Oregonians, and they're really important to us for the safety of the system. And the legislature stepped into that space and said, we need to fund $19 million towards those operational elements. That is a small bite towards kind of the global conversation we've been having. And while I won't go through all of the details, I thought I'd take a moment to describe for you what you won't see from ODOT kind of coming forward in this transportation discussion. So the ODOT that you're all used to has a long project lists that we brought forward to say all of these projects have to be part of the equation, expansion projects and other things in the system. And that has been kind of the foundation of at least a starting point in the dialogue for transportation funding in previous packages, whether it's the OTIA program for bridges or the historic House Bill 2017 program. There was project-rich elements of that. The Joint Committee has been working with us really for the last 3 years on that operational side, though, which is absent some of those other pieces. And so what ODOT's bringing forward is, here's an answer to all your questions about where we're operationally deficient, what services are important to Oregonians, how do we then support those services and fund them, and then what is the overall number associated with that. So in broad brush, what you see is really three main categories that I've been kind of driving towards. One is operating the system. So it's all of those things on the operational side. The next is those safety elements that really get to local, but also some more statewide elements. You heard some mention earlier of Safe Routes to School, Great Streets program, those kinds of things. Some of that is in the deficiency category that we brought forward. And then finally, finish what we started. A couple of big projects in House Bill 2017, Rose Quarter and 205, that the legislature and our committee chairs have asked me to bring forward to say, what is the deficit? What do we have that's still left unpaid for those projects? Now, I want to be super clear. That's not all of the asks that will find their way for our Joint Committee as well as other members of the legislature to have to adjudicate. They are going to be bombarded with asks from all over the state. But we're really focusing on that operational need and the safety elements, because the safety elements can really help not just in the safety of the system, but things like our Great Streets program and things like our Safe Routes to School program can really help in our climate reduction efforts. So that's good. When you look at the operations and maintenance side, that really helps in our climate adaptation efforts because we can then maintain the system before it becomes a liability. So that's good. So it really does bring forward that focus without a long laundry list of projects that you would normally see. The last thing I would say is all of these things that I'm describing, I want to double down on the point that was made by my Chair McLean on the local jurisdictional needs as well. Cities and counties are expressing the very same, and in fact, even more loudly than I am, that they have an operational deficit that's hard for them to continue to manage to. And so as you think about what the framing of the need is, that's how we've been framing it. As city and county needs, along with our needs for literally just maintaining what we have. And then the legislature obviously has to contend with how would you then fund that? And I would say that we've also brought forward that there's a structural deficit in the way we fund transportation, not just in the amounts that are funded. It is the structural element of how it's funded is difficult to then keep pace with the needs. And that's going to get worse into the future. And so we're really advocating for something that diversifies that funding stream, much to what you've heard from the co-chairs. And then finally, and I'll get off my soapbox for a second, the final element is we have about 19 states in the country that index either to inflation or index to fuel economy or index to some metric that allows them to index their transportation funding. We haven't done that yet. And what we see right now is, by way of example, House Bill 2017 was historic. It was a fantastic investment, not just in individual elements, but programmatically, it did things that it had never done before in the transportation sector. So it really did chart a new course for transportation. And as you think about its buying power today, when you adjust it for inflation, is actually less than the day before they passed it. And so we have to look at indexing and inflation adjusting the transportation network, or unfortunately, we'll be back knocking on the door of the legislature every other year, and I don't think they want that.
Thank you, Director Strickler. You and Representative McLean both mentioned some other states that have maybe done things a little differently. Are there states that you are looking to or have looked to that have some nuggets of really good ideas that you're hoping to bring to Oregon?
I've gone to 3 meetings in the last like 15, 16 months, and we've had between 18 and 28 other states that have been there. 2 of them were through the national legislative, groups. And then one of them was a group that had both legislators, business, DMVs, folks that actually were in construction and build, and that they were all wonderful meetings. And it's funny, they think Oregon's on the cutting edge with our 12 to 14-year-old pilot on vehicle miles traveled. And I told him basically, if you think a 12 or 14-year-old project's cutting edge, we've got some other things we can share too. But and a lot of those folks actually have gone ahead and put together some type of a program on either Weight Mile, which we use, and then also the pilot on vehicle miles traveled. And we kind of compared notes at those meetings on what was working well, and what had challenges. And I know that both ODOT, I know that legislators like my co-chair and I are all working on trying to gather those ideas. Street Trust brought in Minnesota's Representative Larry Kraft, who has great timing. He came in when they had something like, I don't know, $11 billion, extra on the table that had just been sitting there for a couple of years. But we've been looking at Minnesota, looking at Utah. I know that one of our congressional delegates, Senator Wyden, does not like Virginia, so I put all of Virginia's stuff away. But we're trying to get money that truly is going to support a long-term, midterm, and short-term need.
Great, thank you.
Chairman Dahl, I think the thing that I would add is I've heard both Chair Gorsuch and Chair McLean mention kind of the diversity of need. And as I think about what's working in other states, the one thing that is consistent is each state is very unique, and Oregon's no different in that. Some things work better in some states than others. But I will say that the universe of things out there that I see right now kind of coming into implementation is indexing is a high priority for most state DOTs in most states. Balancing your registration fees and your gas tax to make sure it's commensurate with what you're trying to achieve. Some states actually fund out of general fund and don't have a dedicated transportation source. And then road usage charge. Hawaii passed a mandatory road usage charge that phases in over time. Now, I'll also say that their geographic considerations allow for that in a way that doesn't have the same connection that we do to neighboring states. That said, it's an important milestone for the transportation sector. But all of those, regardless of what you choose, and I forgot to mention tolling was another one. But all of those have a different timeline and pace at which they bring actual benefit to the revenue problem that we have in front of us. And so it really does have to be, to what both of the co-chairs have mentioned before, has to be a diverse system, has to be something that works for Oregon, and it has to produce something that's tangible for Oregonians.
Great. Thank you, Director. You and Representative McLean both brought up tolling, and I know that the department has put a lot of study into looking at congestion pricing around the metro area, and that at least for right now, it's kind of off the table due to some concerns about potential impacts on certain segments of our population. Do you see that coming up again, and or any opportunities to try and look at that and restructure that potential opportunity?
Well, I would like to point out that right now we have our Transportation Commission Vice Chair, Lee Beyer, and also our Portland Transportation member who are on a committee for tolling for the I-5 bridge. And so tolling is, being discussed, and it is part of hopefully making good on the commitment that we made to Washington State that the two of us would be together for a successful finish and completion of that project for both resiliency, for helping with congestion, and also basically to support the idea that we need it for our West Coast economy all the way from Canada to Mexico. And so it's out there. We also had a change of circumstance when the governor put tolling on the sideboard and said, let's take another look at it, or let's have more interaction that seems to be more positive or supportive. And in that situation, we stopped the idea of tolling Abernathy. There's conversation out there about that. It's not all people agreeing that we should not toll Abernathy, but again, Senator Gorsuch and I get to go talk on Friday to Clackamas County. And so one of the questions I know we're both going to ask is, well, if not tolling, then what? And so it's that, to my co-chair's thought, that we need to figure this out and we need to look for solutions. I think it's important for us to continue that dialogue.
And I would add, there are other things that the Department of Transportation is considering to finish paying for the Oregon City Bridge, Abernathy Bridge. So right now, we're really not sure what the governor's opinion will be going forward in terms of tolling in the entire state. It's never been suggested so far, except for Portland Metro. But it is definitely something that the governor has to be on board with. The one problem I think with tolling the bridge in Oregon City is that the folks there felt that they were being singled out. That's what we heard a lot. And you're doing projects over here, and how come you're not tolling them? So I think there's a lot that we need to discuss when it comes to tolling. Interstate Bridge, I think, is what we have to do, but the rest of it, it'll be us and leadership in the legislature and the governor will all have to sit down and really talk seriously about this.
Will there be any kind of congestion pricing built into the toll on the Columbia crossing?
Mr. Strickland might have that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. At this point, we've got a joint commission that's meeting to talk about toll rate analysis and toll rate setting. So it's worth noting that we have a couple of members from the Oregon Commission and a couple of members from the Washington Commission, really meeting to kind of determine how best to analyze different toll rate structures and meet the financial needs as well as the operational characteristics for the overall program. What I can say is what I've heard from each of them. And while no final decisions have been made, so I want to be clear, they're still in the deliberation phase. But what I've heard has been really positive around time of day pricing to help manage the peak of the peak. And that's a form of congestion pricing, as you well know, as well as a low income toll program being part of the dialogue. Now, again, that has implications that have far reaches into Seattle and other areas too. So they've got a lot to wrestle with, but I certainly have heard them talking about those as part of the tools for the I-5 bridge.
And as you may have seen in New York City was ready to go to congestion pricing for cars going on to Manhattan. And in the 11th hour, the governor pulled the plug on that, which I think is unfortunate. It certainly doesn't help other places like our own who are suggesting that. But I think, congestion pricing and especially the low income aspects of it are really important for us to consider.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time together. This has been a great conversation. I want to open it up for other commissioners that might have a couple of additional questions, and then I'll wrap up. I don't see any. If I missed your hand, please go ahead and step in. Hearing none. I guess one last question and then a big thank you. Director Strickler, I heard you say you've got kind of three main asks: operations, safety, and finish what you start. And earlier today, you talked about the fact that your climate work is kind of an all agency climate work. So I'm assuming that you will put that climate lens, and I guess I'm hoping that the Joint Transportation Commission will, as well as the specifics of the package are pulled together. As we noted earlier, the transportation emissions are the biggest part of our current footprint and due to potentially get larger in coming years. So we'll be interested in hearing more of your thinking about how this next package can help address the transportation emissions. And again, I just want to thank all of you for a great conversation today. And I'm excited about all the ideas that you're looking into, and really appreciate the work that's in front of you this coming year to, as Representative McLean, you mentioned, to make sure we get something passed during the session and get something that's going to be great for Oregonians across the state. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair McDonald.
We will go ahead and take our break now. I think we are scheduled to come back at 3. So it'll be a slightly shorter break, but if everyone will, again, when you're back at your seat, come back on video so we can kind of know when folks are reassembling to get started. And thanks again, Director Strickler and Susan, for your presentation. It's really, really informative. Go back on video just so we can track who's all back. I would appreciate it, and we'll get started in a couple minutes. looks like we've got for folks that are back already. So that's great. We can go ahead and get started. Amy, remind me, do we get notice of somebody who wants to testify in advance so we can kind of know how many presenters we might have? Or are we doing it kind of one by one as people raise hands?
We do it one by one as people raise hands.
Okay, great. Just a reminder, if you do want to give testimony, we should be starting that in 30 or 40 minutes. And you can raise your hand to get in the queue for providing public testimony. With that, I will turn things over to Amy for our next agenda item, who's going to walk us through our work plan and the deliverables that we have over the next year and a half or so.
Thank you, Chair McDonald, and hello, commissioners. So first, I want to start with our 2024 deliverables. These are reports that we are required to submit by the end of this year, as well as a DEQ process that the commission is required to consult on. First, just to remind all of the commissioners, our 2024 meeting dates are on August. Our next meeting will be August 1st, followed by September 17th, October 15th, and November 12th. So our first deliverable well, it's not our first one due, but our probably biggest deliverable for the year will be the commission's biennial report to the legislature. This report is due on December 1st, and we are currently planning to get input from the commission at 2 upcoming meetings. We'd like to get some preliminary input from the commission at the September 17th meeting, and then we intend to put a draft before the commission on October 15th. By November 1st, we are planning to have pens down on the report so that our comms team can format it. So we're hoping to have all edits and additions made to that report by the end of October. Our next deliverable for the year is our annual accounting report to the legislature on the Natural and Working Lands Fund. The commission is required to provide an annual report to the legislature that summarizes the uses of the Natural and Working Land Fund by the recipient agencies. And this report is also required to identify additional funding needs. So in order to produce this report, the agencies that have received funding from the Natural and Working Lands Fund, so to remind all of the commissioners, the Oregon Department of Agriculture, Oregon Department of Forestry, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board have all received monies from that fund. And so the commission and ODO are required to consult with those agencies in order to produce this report. Now, the report is due to the legislature on September 15th, and so we are planning to bring a draft of the report to the commission on August 1st for final input. We also are required to submit our biennial report to the legislature on the Natural and Working Lands Fund. This report is due on December 1st, and it must include a list of funded and planned projects, which includes a list of projects funded in the last 24 months, which will be a longer time frame than we'll actually be looking at for this report because the agencies have not had these funds for 24 months. And the amount of funding that's expended on each project. It also should include an assessment of projects under baselines and metrics identified through separate commission processes. Now, those processes, as I'll get to, are still underway, so we likely will not have a baseline determined and or have all of the metrics established in time to inform this report, but they will inform future reports. We also need to include a list of projects, grants, or other activities that are planned for the following year, so 2025, and a list of projects in environmental justice communities. Again, for this report, we need to consult with the Natural and Working Lands agencies. And we also are required by statute to solicit public comment and include a summary of comments received in the final report that we submit to the legislature and the governor. So we are planning to bring that report before the commission on October 15th. And then finally, this is not directly one of the commission's deliverables, but the Department of Environmental Quality is producing a consumption-based greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and that inventory must be completed by September 15th, and DEQ is required to consult with the commission on the development of that inventory. So DEQ has been meeting regularly with a committee of commission members, and it has provided some preliminary information to the commission on that inventory. DEQ staff is also planning to present to the commission at its August 1st meeting. And before I move on, if anyone has any questions about any of those deliverables, please raise your hand.
Questions or comments?
Don't see any, so let's move on. Oops. Okay, so now I would like to just briefly go over some of our deliverables and projects under our Natural and Working Lands work streams through both the remainder of this year and then into 2025 as well. First, ODO and the commission are directed to jointly develop a Natural and Working Lands net carbon sequestration and storage inventory that's based on the best available field-based and remote sensing data on biological carbon sequestration on natural and working lands. In developing this inventory, ODO and the commission must coordinate with the Oregon Department of Forestry, Department of Agriculture, Watershed Enhancement Board, Department of State Lands, Department of Land Conservation and Development, and federal land management partners, such as the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. ODO and the commission must also make a draft version of the inventory publicly available and receive comments from the public, state agencies, and an advisory committee, a National and Working Lands Advisory Committee. This inventory is due on December 1st, 2025. So ODO and the commission will be working on this inventory, putting this inventory together with our contractors, which we are in the process of developing a request for proposals to seek a contractor to do this work. And so we'll be working on this through the end of 2025. So expect to hear much more about this process moving forward. ODO and the commission are also required to identify a net biological carbon sequestration and storage baseline for natural and working lands. And the commission may use 1990 as a baseline if ODO determines that there's adequate information to support setting a baseline at that year. There is not a specific statutory deadline for identifying this baseline. So we are hoping to identify that the commission can identify a baseline and decide on a baseline by the end of this year so that it can inform our natural and working lands work streams in 2025. The legislature also directed the commission and ODO to work together to develop activity-based metrics for evaluating progress in increasing the amount of carbon that's sequestered and stored on natural and working lands. And these include activity-based metrics and community impact metrics. The activity-based metrics should be used to evaluate progress towards increasing net biological carbon sequestration and storage as measured against the baseline that's the commission approves. community impacts metrics should be used for evaluating implementation impacts on landowners, land managers, and communities, and used to evaluate positive and negative effects over time of net biological carbon sequestration and storage strategies. These metrics, again, do not have a statutory deadline, so we are hoping to finalize these metrics by mid-2025 so they can inform our other work streams. The commission has also, and Odo, have been directed to establish non-binding net biological carbon sequestration and storage goals for Oregon's natural and working lands in consultation with ODF, ODA, OWEB, and ODFW. And these goals must be established by January 1st, 2026. And then finally, Odo was directed to study workforce and training programs that are needed to support natural climate solutions on natural and working lands, and to draft and submit a report on our findings to the legislature by September 15th, 2025. So stay tuned for much more information and updates on those work streams. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand or comments. Don't see any hands raised. So I will move on to our climate action work streams. First, we are planning to produce an updated greenhouse gas reduction forecast. And this would be a continuation of the Commission's Transformational Integrated Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reduction Project, or TIGR. So we are calling this TIGR 2.0. And we are planning to contract with the consultant that produced the initial TIGR analysis to perform new model runs and analysis in early 2020 or in 2024 or early 2025 to incorporate the impacts of federal funding on our progress, on our adopted policies and programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions economy-wide. Next, we are planning to continue to provide oversight and track the progress toward implementing the Commission's roadmap to 2030. And this will be ongoing work throughout 2024 and 2025. And then finally, Odo is working with DEQ to produce a comprehensive climate action plan that's funded through the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant that the state received from the Environmental Protection Agency. And this plan is due to EPA by December 31st of 2025. We're hoping to submit it to EPA prior to that date. There are many elements to this plan. We've provided some initial updates to the Commission already about the nature of this plan, and we will be providing more updates as we progress forward. So those are the work plan updates that I have. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of those work streams? Seeing none, let's move forward and talk a little bit more about the Commission's 2024 biennial report to the legislature. So the Commission's report, as I'm sure everyone on the Commission is aware, is intended to discuss the impacts of climate change, the benefits of climate mitigation and adaptation, the state's progress towards achieving its greenhouse gas reduction goals, emerging public policy and technological advancements, and as a new component moving forward, updates on implementation of the Commission's roadmap to 2030 and its natural and working lands proposal. And so I think I'll pass it back to you, Chair McDonald, to lead a discussion of this report and figure out what the commissioners would like to see from this upcoming report.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate you walking through that. It was really clear. And I just want to also note that it's a lot of work. It's a lot of really good work. And so it'll be great to, as new additional staff come on, to really help us advance all of this work. It's exciting to be able to take it on. And I just want to thank Amy and Alan and Director Benner and others at Oregon Department of Energy for all the great work that you always do to help support the commission and its work. In terms of the biennial report to the legislature, it's our opportunity to put things, remind the legislature, identify important priorities that we hope the legislature will pay attention to as it goes into the long session. And so I think it's our opportunity to remind and identify kind of next steps that need to be considered. We've had some preliminary conversations about, in particular, asking the agencies that have existing actions. That the first big recommendation that we made in the roadmap was to make sure that the existing programs and policies that are in place are well resourced and being able to achieve the ambition that that they were intended to achieve. So we have discussed asking those agencies, and I think it's about 4 or 5 agencies, to provide kind of a short report about how implementation is going, identify any places where we may get an interruption if there isn't new funding made available to continue those programs. We haven't really outlined what that might look like, but hopefully we'll get some good information so that we can make sure we're getting the best information to the legislature in terms of what we hope they'll be thinking about. Similarly, we have, as Amy described, a lot of good work that we'll be doing over the course of the next year and a half to advance the natural and working lands proposal. I think there are some additional opportunities for us to kind of go back to that proposal, which we adopted in 2021, and just think about what elements are in that would be kind of the next steps, and or to reflect on some of the successes that occurred during the last session and that we could build on in the next session. So I think it's a really important report for us, and we have typically included recommendations. Certainly we want to really focus in on the roadmap and the natural and working lands proposal, so we don't want to come up with recommendations that are different than that, but I think the opportunity to kind of hone in on the things that we think are most important to make those 2 plans successful will, in my view, is going to be an important part of the report that we provide. So I'll just open it up for any other commissioners and or agency directors, if there are topics that you think we should really make sure we touch on in our next biennial report. Really appreciate any thoughts, and certainly we'll have an opportunity in our August meeting to come back to this topic as well. Dave Wortman.
Yeah, I guess my question is, will this update also include some progress updates to the to Governor Brown's executive orders 1720, 1721, and 2004, all of which address climate? Governor Kotek has indicated that those are executive orders that are continuing forward. And so there was quite a bit in those, and I think it's interesting to have some progress updates on those.
Absolutely. And, while we focused in on 4 or 5 agencies, I think the commission would welcome other agencies to provide updates on how things are going and places where there might be important needs to invest more, adjust policies. We had kind of a certain set of actions that we were able to evaluate as part of the TIGR technical analysis that went into the identification of the elements of the roadmap. We acknowledge that there are other important enabling and foundational elements of the work that couldn't really be quantified in terms of emissions reduction, but are important as well. So I think we would welcome other agencies to provide reports and or updates on how things are going relative to the plans that were developed as part of that executive order, and the good work that the agencies did in 2020 on that. So we'll look forward to working with you, Dave, and with any other agency that is interested in providing a similar kind of update that the commission can consider and highlight as part of the report.
Chair McDonald, I would just add, this is Alan Zelenka, Odo. I would just add that the TIGR 2.0 process is going to take another snapshot and see where we are with regard to our progress towards the 2035 goal in EO 20-04 that's still in effect, and looking at how much we've been able to do there. So all those programs and regulations already adopted that we have in place that set up the framework for us to meet our goal. We'll be assessing where we are on those and any new additional things that are occurring in the state in terms of helping us meet that goal. And then we're working with some of our other partners on potentially doing another survey like Odo did in the 2022 Biennial Energy Report, the BER, where we enumerated all the different programs that are being done in the state. So that ought to help satisfy a lot of those requirements.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. Commissioner Apter? I think you had your hand up, but I don't. Oh, there it is. It's underneath, underneath Alan's name.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to express support for lifting up and using a similar framing as the roadmap to 2030 and the recommendations included in that report, which of course took just a huge amount of time and energy, and there's just so much good information that I think is still relatively evergreen when it comes to both where we are as far as achieving our existing goals, where we have opportunities to strengthen those to align with the best available science. And then I just think the framing of recommendations is also just hugely important in terms of ensuring that they're useful and digestible for the legislative audience. So I think thinking about framing around, what do we need to make sure we stay on track to continue strong implementation of our existing cornerstone climate and equity programs and policies, whether that's building off of the conversation earlier, I think our last meeting around transmission and grid resilience, funding for our state energy and environment and natural resource agencies, thinking about, and then similarly separating out where there are potential gaps based on, at this point we'll have word around CPRG funding, for example, kind of identifying where are those gaps, how are we doing in the recommendation in that report to leverage federal investments in climate and clean energy. And then just being very clear in terms of, additional policies and where those fit into addressing and achieving the gap in our current climate landscape and emissions trajectory. So I just noting that I hope and agree with lifting up those recommendations and potentially just thinking about, what framing is most useful going into the next session, especially given what we know about what legislators are already working on. And I think today's conversation is a great part of that in terms of considering where the 2024 report can lean into those opportunities.
Thank you, Commissioner Apter. Another topic that I think is important for us to spend some time on in a upcoming commission meeting is really thinking about equity as it relates to the work that we did as part of the roadmap. I think we all wish that we had more funding to be able to do a deeper dive in that. I know the state of Oregon has been investing in improving information that would help inform decisions from an equity lens. So I think that might be an important topic for us to take up and think about how we might strengthen a recommendation around equity in our, or speak to the recommendation that was in the roadmap. So that's another important topic on my list. Other comments from commission members and directors? Seeing any hands? With that, thank you again, Amy, for walking through that. As I mentioned, it is a really important report, I think, and deserves commission attention. And we only have a few meetings between now and the time it's due. So we'll have to really get going on drafting it and making sure that the reports that we have that are due are made available to the public in a timely way, so we can get good input on the information that we're putting into those reports. So thank you again. We're a little ahead of schedule, but I think maybe we should go ahead and open things up for public comment.
Okay, if any members of the public wish to provide public comment, please raise your hand now.
I see Eddie Sherman has a hand raised. Then Brett Morgan.
Okay, and Stacy, I think I'm going to need your help. It looks like they are all muted, so I think I'm going to need your help to unmute. Thank you.
Eddie Sherman's unmuted. Thank you.
Yes.
Welcome, Eddie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eddie Sherman. I'm Navajo in Omaha, and I wear a few different hats, but I'm principal of Against the Current Consulting and also a co-chair for the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians Climate Resiliency Committee. And I was coming today to share some information from the last convention, which was held about 2 weeks ago in Canyonville, Oregon. And so AT and I adopted a resolution in supporting a tribal engagement strategy that was developed to support the Oregon Climate Action Commission in its tribal engagement efforts. We have kind of circulated a draft, and I believe we shared the initial draft with Kathy as well, but I think it was a very in-depth process that kind of gives information on how to navigate meaningful tribal engagement with the Oregon, 9 Oregon tribes, the non-federally recognized tribes, and the tribes that have treaty rights that may be impacted by uh, climate resiliency goals and management of natural working lands. And so we put together a pretty thorough document. It's a living document, and it's how we've framed it for tribal leaders, as there are continual transitions in tribal leadership, as well as staff that oversee the natural resources departments. And so we've just been working over the last probably 6 months on and off, just to make sure that we were working in response to the bill's passage that requires engagement, and realize that a lot of folks, especially within AT&I and tribal governments, were at capacity, as well as OCAC. And so we kind of felt there was an opportunity to fill a void and jump in and do some of this work that we already know how to do, and we've already just built upon some of our past experience and network of relationships. And so again, we were just wanted to loop back around and just share that information from this last convention, and look forward to sharing the updated iteration, as some tribal leaders have transitioned, as well as some staff members. And so, but yeah, that's more or less a high level briefing of where we're at. And I'll be sure to share the resolution that was adopted, as well as the most recent iteration of the tribal engagement strategy for OCAC.
Thank you, Eddie. And I really appreciate the work that you took on to develop that, and I'm looking forward to seeing the resolution and getting started on that. So really appreciate that. And if it's appropriate, would love to be able to post that on our website, and be able to share that out as appropriate. So look forward to finding some time in the next week or so to check in and kind of find out what the next steps are. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be sure to send that information on to you.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions from commissioners for Eddie? Okay, we'll go ahead to Brett Morgan.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Chair McDonald, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Brett Morgan. I'm the Transportation Policy Director at Climate Solutions. And I just wanted to provide some comments to you today. And quick question, Chair, do I have 2 minutes or 3 minutes?
I think we'll have time for you to have 3 minutes.
Okay, I don't plan on using it. I just want to make sure I'm respectful. Yes, I just wanted to comment. I really appreciated the conversation we had earlier today with members of ODOT and the other agencies in regards to climate action and transportation. As you all heard at length, within Oregon, 40% of greenhouse gas emissions come from the transportation sector. And to just pull on a thread as well that was brought up during the discussion today, the international IPCC reports explicitly dictate that we need to reduce vehicle miles traveled by 15%, regardless of the vehicle is gas or electric, in order to meet our climate goals. And so focusing on VMT is a really important component of ensuring we can actually meet our climate goals into the future. I also just wanted to pull through one element as well as an equity issue. We know that 1/3 of Oregonians that are ages 16 and older lack regular access to a car, and are dependent therefore on other forms of multimodal transportation in order to get around their community and meet their basic needs. As we continue to work on a 2025 package, I think just a couple of things I want to emphasize to you all is that, one, there's a lot of really good programs that the state has already developed, specifically the STIF, the Statewide Transit Improvement Fund, as well as Safe Routes to School, and a variety of other programs passed in the House Bill 2017 package that are actually oversubscribed and would benefit greatly from more funding in order to actually achieve the levels of service that are being requested from local jurisdictions. So as we continue to move down this conversation, opportunities to support those programs, existing state programs, with more dollars that we know help achieve our multimodal and climate goals are really important. I also wanted to uplift a couple of other things. We think there are several policy planks, we being Climate Solutions and some of the partners we're working with in the Move Oregon Forward campaign, specifically some of these policies like Colorado's greenhouse gas planning rule, which dictates that state departments of transportation have to plan for future outlays of greenhouse gas emissions for major projects and offset them, to the question raised by Nora, a fix it first policy that statutorily requires the state to maintain its current assets before it invests in other ones, and just increasing the overall percentage of dollars dedicated to walking and biking. Right now we have the bike bill that dedicates 1% of funding. With more funding in those buckets, we could just do more. I'm going to put it in the chat as well, but it's a really great report that I helped moderate and inform on when I was working at 1000 Friends, called Oregon in Motion, written by Cassie Wilson, their transportation policy director. Gives a lot of context on the 2017 package, and then also the failure of the 2015 package, which is important for a variety of reasons, particularly because some of the climate expectations in a package that was put together in 2015 didn't meet muster in terms of the environmental community and climate community, which caused an effective retooling to get the package that we got in 17. So I'll put that in the chat, but just wanted to say I appreciate the dialogue and the connections we're making today between climate action and transportation, and I appreciate also just the chairs and Director Strickler for being here, because they are some of the busiest people in Oregon right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. I'd love to get more information from you about the oversubscription, kind of the level of oversubscription of some of the key programs. So look forward to hearing more input from you and others about important aspects of addressing greenhouse gases in the transportation sector, and how we can do as much as possible. So thank you for your comments. Linda Craig. Welcome. Yes.
All right. Chair McDonald, commissioners, I'm Linda Craig, and I'm with MCAT, Mobilizing Climate Action Together. And I want to also thank you for scheduling the transportation session that you had today. Having heard from Amy about the work plan that is ahead of you, I really hate to try to add to your workload, but I want to just say, and I know you know how important the 2025 legislature is to reducing transportation emissions. I'm afraid, however, with all of the stresses in the 2025 session with budget and what is before our transportation legislators and the department, that climate might take a back seat. And so I urge you to stay involved and to be involved to make sure that we can maximize emissions in whatever package is passed for 2025. Thank you for your work.
Appreciate that, Linda. And we do intend to circle back to the conversation on transportation, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, a number of times over the course of the next year, and really try and hear more from the legislators, the department, but also, as I just mentioned, the public and experts that we can pull in to help us really understand all the options that we have. So thank you. Appreciate that. I don't see any other hands. So I will close the public comment. I can figure out how to get it off my screen. There we go. I think we can move into closing out the meeting. As Amy mentioned in the work plan, our next meeting is August 1st, and we will be hearing from DEQ on the consumption-based inventory and recommendations that they will be providing to the legislature. And we have an opportunity to have had an opportunity to provide input on, and we'll get another opportunity August 1st. I want to thank the members of the commission who've been on the committee and working with DEQ on that project, and we're looking forward to attending the next meeting later this month. In addition, we will hear from the agencies that received funding from the Natural and Working Lands Fund, and Amy is working with that group of agencies to come up with a template for their report, and we'll get that drafted and posted by mid-July so that there's an opportunity for public input on what's in that report, and then we'll be considering that at the August meeting. We will finalize our agenda and make sure we've got time allocated as it needs to be for those two efforts, which will take precedence. But we also anticipate that we'll be inviting one or two of our new agency directors to present on the work that they're doing, their agency's doing relative to climate action. And that might be an additional element of our discussion. And then we'll be looking for a time either in August or September to, I think, add some other topics that will help us shape the recommendations that we want to make to the legislature and what goes into the report. So excited about the work ahead of us. And I want to thank the commissioners, the agency directors, and the public that joined us today. I think we had up to 40 people joining us in this meeting, in addition to those that are on the commission. So really appreciate the interest and the focus on climate action from all of you. So thank you. And with that, well, maybe Amy, is there anything else housekeeping wise that we want to say before we close things out?
I can't think of anything. I think you covered it.
Excellent. All right. Well, with that, I will close the June 11th, 2024 meeting of the Oregon Climate Action Commission. And again, thank you for all your time and attention.
Well done, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
We want to do.
Kathy, we'll send a team.
Sounds good. Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, bye.